My name's Suzy Dean. I'm the Chief Executive at Adin365 and also a Microsoft 365 MVP.
And my name's Wes Hackett, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP in M365, have been for about 10 years. Back then it was called SharePoint MVP. So I've been around working with SharePoint since about 2006, all the way into the modern day cloud experiences.
The case studies we're going to be looking at today really focus on the end user experience, and that's really a reflection of what we do at Adin365 as a business. We tend to work with clients around SharePoint, Teams, Power Platform, Viva workloads. So at Adin365, we work with a whole range of clients, and as I said, we're going to be looking at four stories today from our client base.
Yeah, and it's important to realise that everything you're going to see today applies to an organisation of 500 people to 50,000 to 250,000. Like size, complexity, the organisation type, they all come with their own nuances, but everything you're going to see can be applied to them. So if you're thinking, hey, I want to get on and start our AI journey, obviously Copilot has been a big announcement set over Ignite and this morning's keynote, but there's much more to AI than just the Copilot experiences. So what we're going to see this afternoon is some of the things that are available right now to any size of organisation. You don't have to be the magical 300 or the magical price point for the Copilot experiences.
Yeah. And this is going to be reflected in the case studies. We're going to start the session today looking at some of our larger clients. St James Place Wealth Management, they have 20,000 employees, and we're going to close with a client that's actually only got 300 employees, so there should be something for everybody here. All of the stories that we share start where the client has delivered their core digital employee experience, or intranet as you might think of it. So know that that has been in place before these other workloads that we're going to talk through today have been adopted. And I think there's some good reasons for that. The information architecture of SharePoint is always quite important in driving the correct answers and results for people, but we'll get into that more as we go through.
Yeah. And remembering SharePoint's power. So people are moving away from thinking about content types, site columns, metadata, tagging, and they're looking for smarter ways to generate content as well. So when you're considering where you start, you're still fundamentally getting your content right. The AI is very good, but it has to have something to work with. The generative side, even then, needs good prompts. So everything we're seeing is still starts from a good SharePoint experience, a good intranet, a good body of content, and it's building on that with that scaling factor of 24/7 availability, multi-language capabilities, and thinking about how you're presenting that information through the channels which the employee is choosing to use. So we're going to start by talking about St James's Place. Now in the UK and several other countries around the world, St James's Place operate as a wealth management organisation. They're roughly 3,000 full-time employees based in nearly sort of 25, 30 offices in the UK. Now, they don't sell their services and their products directly to consumer. So they are employing a partnership network, much like Microsoft. Microsoft have Microsoft partners, St James's Place have St James's Place partners. And those partnerships are independent businesses employing their own people, doing their own business with their customers and clientele. Now, financial services is a regulated industry, so it's very important that the advice, the products, the services meet those regulatory and compliance aspects, but bringing the human side to that interaction. When you're a financial advisor, you're building a relationship with your client, you're advising them on how to get the best financial performance with the money and the investment they're looking to make. So at St James's Place, there's a very large body of content supporting financial advice. One of those elements is the advice framework, and this is tens of people who maintain content that helps the financial advisory services be supported, be compliant, and continue to change as laws and influences outside of St James's Place change that content and the behaviour.
So St James Place have 3,000 employees and then a further 16,000 partners accessing their tenant in a first-party fashion in order to leverage the content that's been made available for them. So in 2021, we delivered the intranet, as I said. That's sort of the baseline for all of these projects. And then we started to think about the advice framework. The advice framework really had three core challenges with it. The first is that the content had been organised based on the teams producing the content, not what would be most intuitive to the partners. Secondly, there really was a need for personalisation. There wasn't any, as Wes has said, there was a very rich, deep body of content, so it was quite hard to get through to the things that partners needed quickly. And so the starting point for the experience was to firstly move that content into an architecture within SharePoint that was going to be more intuitive to the partners. So we did that piece. And then, Wes, how did we pick up and use AI to help deliver on the personalisation requirement?
So one of the personalisation requirements is the idea of every individual wants to collect the information they need. So they're using the Add-in 365 SharePoint extension called Collections. And this is allowing an advisor to go through the advice framework, so thousands of pieces of guidance and notes, and collect them together in a meaningful fashion. So in this example, obviously it's not their real environment, but we're showing like an indicative experience here. We've got a meeting with a high net worth individual, a client where we have certain guides and certain materials we need, and we're able to use Collections by browsing around the framework, collecting those SharePoint modern pages in to an experience that makes sense to me, and it's mine. I've called it what I wanted to. I put the things in it that I need, and it's available to me wherever I go. And then we're combining that with the Viva Connections dashboard tile, which supports that advisor being able to access it on a phone. So if you think about it, they're going to visit that client. You know, very rarely does the client come to an office. They go and meet that client somewhere else. So it's putting that version of truth in their hands on their team's device wherever they go. And that means that there's a reduction in information security problems because that content is living in M365. There's an improvement in version of the truth because they've pinned rather than downloaded and copied. And because it's mine and I've set it up the way that I want to work, it supports me and how I action that conversation, while it still also makes sure I do things in a compliant and supported fashion.
And this is really helping those advisors to work in a way that's meaningful for them. With 16,000 partners, some of them are going to be product specialists, others are going to work perhaps with a high net worth individual, and so their way of aggregating that content is going to be different to the next person. And so we were able to deliver those on that objective of personalisation in a meaningful way using the Collections capability. But we also had a requirement from the client around consolidating and responding better to feedback that was going to be coming in from those partners. They'd started with some
telephone
old school
numbers.
Ways. Yes, telephone numbers. They had telephone numbers.
Yeah, and one of their interesting challenges is newer members of staff joining the organisation didn't like calling a telephone line. They expected to be able to WhatsApp and get a response. It's a generational change as people have moved into using an app first, thinking about the messaging, rather than picking up the phone and calling. So they weren't even able to reach necessarily the whole of their audience through the medium and the channels that they were delivering. So the first thing we did was we deployed our Content Confidence Kit. So this, again, is one of our tools that we can put into a SharePoint environment. So the first part of that tool is that as the owner of the content, I can create my AI knowledge base directly from in SharePoint. No complex Azure training, no stepping out into another system. This is normal SharePoint. I'm in edit mode. So I'm taking my content, I'm analysing that through, we're using some AI pieces to extract important information from the page content that you've written, and we're injecting that into the knowledge experience that is then exposed through a chatbot.
And that's a really important point, because I think often bot capabilities are asking you to maintain a secondary set of or source of content. So having this coming straight from the SharePoint page allows for editors to curate and make sure those question and answer sets are right for the content that's being represented. And then as somebody comes through and asks a question, they can get to the content answer that they're looking for. But the part of this that I think is really high value and has certainly done well within St James Place is actually the feedback mechanism that allows those that we want to use the content to actually feed back. And in the example you can see here, I'm consuming the content, but I'm not that happy with the content that's being provided for me. I want more depth. I want it in a slightly different format. And if you think about any common digital workplace scenario, there's often some guesswork on behalf of the content creators as to what people want to see and read. And so by having this continuous feedback, we can both evolve with the needs of the consumers of our content, but also learn to understand where there are content gaps. From that feedback mechanism, in this scenario, we've filtered the responses into 2 different SharePoint lists that happen to be picked up in Teams. The first is the specific feedback that we're being given to content, but the other is questions asked with no content response, where people have asked questions and we don't have that material, which has really served to hydrate the content roadmaps for those organisations. So the AI piece is really in that natural language understanding through the chatbot interface. But in the end, I think the part that drives the value for the organisation is the feedback mechanism, so we know where our content should be headed to drive maximum business value.
Yeah, and again, as that content evolves, while Suzy was talking, that the demo is playing out the scenario as the editor, where I've got that feedback. I've gone back to the knowledge base and I've, again, iterated my content. And the next person to come along is still not going to be happy about it. They're still going to be saying, okay, I think you can do better. So it's that continual improvement, the confidence that somebody has in the response, the belief they have that it's accurate information, it's up to date, you've thought about it and you've delivered it as the content owner. This whole mechanic is boosting that experience. And, as that organization contemplates moving into Copilot, this is content that's ready for Copilot. So we're going to move through, and then the final step here is that we're going to go into what we call a smart question, which is a guided step. We've been building up this example, which is steps 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but it actually needs to be executed sequentially. So we've sort of shortened Blue Peter style example. We've got the steps provided in a hierarchical fashion. So we've built that hierarchy for them. And then the consuming advisor would be able to step through and see the responses one after the other and go through a process. So again, this not only gives them the content, but it gives them the content in a way they can consume it and action that as they go through. So that's really helping to make sure it's right, make sure it's available 24/7, and it's massively reduced the number of help desk telephone calls and emails to the triage inbox that they've had.
And I think we can see that the model that's been set up using those SharePoint sites as the foundation for the high quality content, but then delivering those very personalised and AI-driven experiences has really worked out well for St James Place and the advice framework that they're delivering to partners. The launch month saw 25,000 uses of that, but it's actually now levelled out at just over 160,000 uses. So, driving continuously at more relevance for that content has really helped to position the advice framework site as being a high-value resource for those partners. And again, in the first month, there were more than 800 questions and answers going through. So if you just think each question might have taken an advisor 10 minutes to talk through on the telephone or in email, that's 8,000 minutes in the first month alone saved for the advice framework team.
Yep. Okay. So again, that's been a powerful enablement. That's a really core, high footfall use site, driven by AI, made sure that those experiences are available 24/7. So let's take a look at one of our next case studies. So Suzy, over to you.
Okay, so ASMPT, bear with me on this one. It's not the most intuitive of businesses, but they build the machines that are used to make semiconductors, which can be found in almost every electronic device, so mobile phones, laptops, televisions. They're 11,300 people globally. They're NASDAQ listed, and so they have enormous campuses of employees in China, actually also in Germany and the UK as well. But I think they're in about 30 countries. I've been working with SharePoint for nearly 20 years, and I can say in that time they are by far the most structurally complex organisation that I've worked with. They had a requirement to govern teams better, and they had the foresight to think about this before they really started to roll out teams to the organisation. And so we sat with them and they said, well, we want to govern teams. We don't want to have to train 11,500 people on how to set sensitivity labels and to follow correct naming conventions, because they didn't think it would be realistic to do that. And I have to say that was also my view of it. That's too big an ask when you think that most people have day jobs to get on with. And so this is really a story about how ASMPT used an Add-in 365 product called a creation pack to ensure consistent governance to their model that they had set out with us at the beginning, but without needing every employee to somehow learn what the right steps might be when they're setting up a Microsoft team to deliver that governance.
Yeah, and as Suzy mentioned, ASM are not a simple organisation. So there's 8 primary languages being spoken across the organisation. So you can communicate in any of those 8, and that's an officially supported language. There's translations involved in most SharePoint experiences. They manufacture very complex things with highly valuable IP. So they tend to have redundancy, just like data centers for Microsoft have a region and another region just in case. They have that for manufacturing facilities. So when you're standing up a collaboration tool, you've got all of that matrix of complexity to go and solve for without training people. And that's a hard ask when you step back and you say, okay, this is all the different settings we might need, this is all the different things we might need. It takes a little while to get the model right. So when we engaged with ASM and we were talking through the different segments, the different languages, the different deltas that they needed across those settings, we were using the audiences and the capabilities within SharePoint to understand a bit more about the profile of the requester. Who's asking for that team? How is that team getting created? We were looking at their attributes, we were looking about their associations, which region they're in, which particular segment, which business area, and we're using the creation pack appropriate for their use case. And then the creation packs go one step further, which is they allow me to sort of say, well, I'd like a task of this type. So it's an ever decreasing funnel of options for me that it understands through that AI model to present. You can have a new team, and I just give it a name and off I go.
Yeah. So we'd worked with IT to understand for any given role, region, what's the naming convention, what should the URL be, do sensitivity labels need to be applied, are we going to allow for guest access? And so that work was done with IT, and they were happy that it was going to be a good user experience and also representative of the governance that they needed. There's 2 models that you can use with the creation packs. The first is that it supports the completely democratized team creation model you get out of the box. So any employee could have gone to create a team, and the creation pack knows who they are, where they are in the world, what they do, and it's applying that governance in the background. That's model 1. Model 2 is that you can still keep teams provisioning within a smaller cohort of people, perhaps your global IT team, for example, and super users, and they would be given a menu, and depending on who was requesting the team, the correct content pack could be used for them. And ASMPT went for the latter option. They had a big global IT team with people in different countries, and they still wanted to be able to do the provisioning, even though it could have been democratized to everybody. And so the experience that IT function have when they go to create a team begins within Teams. And again, we like a chatbot interface. So to sort of talk to and get a team set up, we say create team, and the person in IT is given a menu of options for the region that they're looking after, and depending on who the requester is, they select the pack, and all that governance is being applied in the background. So really, really good because we can't expect all of our IT people to stay in role forever. So knowing that even as people come and go, we're just saying click the right one, depending on who they are in the business, is really, really good. And the second real benefit to it is it's in plain English. So you could have somebody that is perhaps less experienced versus someone that's been in the IT function for a long time and they'd still kind of know which route to go down. And of course, IT are very happy because they know every team that's been created has the right governance around it. There's a second layer to the experience. So at this point, we've provisioned a team, but it's actually an empty vessel. And that's okay in a lot of scenarios. But to support scenarios where there's a lot of repetitive processes, or we really, really want people in that role to follow best practices, we can deploy something called a content pack. So we have a creation pack for the governance and a content pack for content. Very Ron Seal naming. And these can be rolled into the team in a phased manner. So this isn't an ASMPT example because, of course, their IP is sensitive. But I've got an example here where I might be working with some sales colleagues on a new opportunity. And I've been told in this organisation that I've joined, there's actually quite a strict set of steps I need to go through if I'm going to go and talk to a client about a new piece of work. And so I'm going to kick off here my first initiation content pack, and that's going to roll into the team SharePoint lists that I should be using, files that I should be using, folders, channel structures. It's going to tab in Salesforce for me, and it's also going to tab in some of our published content within SharePoint to support me doing my work. We do this because we know that, especially in large enterprises, even if there's a big change team and there's lots of work going into defining how we do something well, and that might be an R&D process. This is a sales example. It might be how you run a marketing event. It doesn't really matter. But a lot of work can go into that, and there's a continuous battle with adherence. Are people following it? Are people doing the thing we want them to be doing? And so by giving all of this content to people where they are about to start the work, we're increasing the chances that they're actually going to be doing what we want them to be doing in the right way and at the right time. And of course, again, as people move on, and in this example, it might be a client that comes back 6 months later and says, well, you know, at pre-sale stage, you did promise this or that. We've got all that working out loud in a team where we can go back and refer to it. We're not kind of going through inboxes to try and find that information. And as we move through to our second content pack, we might have moved further on into this particular sales process, and we can run the information we need as a second stage into that same team. So you can break down big processes into gates or steps, or you can run information directly into that team. But the point is really around adherence to best practices when we're trying to get people work in quite a process-orientated way.
Yeah, and it has added benefits that you're evolving an existing team. You're not throwing it away or archiving it or leaving it to just wilt. You're taking it forward in the process of your business activity. So it's giving you structure, and it's giving you a way to evolve the said structure in a very consistent fashion. So this supports people's mobility across projects. If you get a SME joining a project, joining another project, they're going to find things in the same places. They're going to have a structure they understand. So it's an incredibly powerful way of scaling best practice and consistency across the organisation.
Great. And ASMPT, on average, create 740 plus teams in a year. So, you know, this is quite a big campus of Microsoft Teams that's growing all the time. And that is used for absolutely everybody, but they have a much smaller cohort of people using the content packs because, as I said, sometimes a freeform team is just fine. But in other instances, we do want people to be following stricter processes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's look at case study number 3. So WPP are the world's largest media agency. They're built up from about 350 plus creatives, design, website building agencies of varying sizes. One of the agencies that we've deployed some of our AI document processes with is Kinetic, and Kinetic specialise in out-of-home media. So you can see there's the Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus, Marks and Spencer's advert they delivered, which is about the welfare of cattle, and it's a three-dimensional advert. It's filmed to appear that the cow steps off the flat surface. So every time you step out your house, you're likely to see something they've designed, they've placed, and they work across, I think, about 25 to 27 countries globally. And in each country, there's different specialisms. So when they execute a project, they are often passing the project through a process, but also through a geography. So we help them to design their active journey, which was owned and operated by an operations team based out of New York. And that starts again with the SharePoint experience. So, it sounds a bit of a no-brainer, but you have to have good SharePoint to drive good content. So we delivered a site that was dedicated to the active journey process experiences. So that takes you through the different stages. And at each stage, we then extend that with the Power Platform. So Power Apps, Power Automate, AI Builder, and some of the what's now SharePoint Premium experiences behind the scenes to process content, generate content, and drive that experience going forward. And that's lifted the visibility that they have across the organization of every single project. And the smartest part of that process is the final step when we generate new content. So the SharePoint experience is easy to navigate. It's available. It's secure, and it's available to everyone in the organization in Kinetic. It's self-service. So again, that time zone difference that they were struggling with, where emails were going and they were losing 24-hour cycles waiting for responses. By using Teams combined with that SharePoint experience, they've got a 24/7 conveyor belt of activities happening across the organization. It's boosted their security, their compliance, because we're in M365. And as they go through that Power Platform application, the very last stage is to deliver the generated content for the case study. So as they fill out forms and they fill out placements and they sell the space and buy the ad boards, all of that's helping to feed in, what does the case study say? So if they place that in 100 locations, the case study is going to say it's in 100 locations. And it's going to pull out the images from some of those larger locations, and it's going to use that in PowerPoint slides. So it splits off and it says, there's a PowerPoint deck, there's a SharePoint page called a case study into a new site, and all of that happens as somebody says, right, now we've put that project live, and it kicks off those AI processes. So the final case study that we're going to go through.
Yes, so we're going to talk to a frontline worker example now. So yet again, it starts with a kind of SharePoint intranet experience. And if we step back, this organisation really did have some tough challenges. So Agrii are an agronomy organisation, and they operate across Europe. They go to farmers and they sell crop or fertiliser, depending on what that farmer wants to grow, but also what's the weather been like, what's the soil like. So there's lots of different factors that inform the recommendation that an agronomist will make to a farmer. They're always out in fields, they're never in the office, and the easiest medium for them would be a mobile phone to get any of their information. Now, Agrii in particular have a hand in 40% of all agricultural output in the whole of the UK, and they also have a huge footprint in Poland and elsewhere. So they're an organisation that has a big impact in how we make food, but they had two very distinct challenges. The first is that the agronomists, who are highly specialised individuals, they're both scientists and salespeople simultaneously. They all, when we started talking to them, turned out did everything completely differently to the next person. And of course, when we try to develop digital experiences, we look for persona, we look for commonality. What do they all do that we can build something around? There was no commonality. It was something to behold. And so something standardised wasn't going to work for them. And that was really the first challenge that we had when we started looking at what we could put in place to satisfy Agrii. The second big challenge is that they had about 100,000 technical documents in motion simultaneously. So one of the challenges with being an agronomist is that you, depending on the season and whether it's been a wet summer or a dry summer, you're going to be recommending something different. So it's not like it's not a kind of discipline where you can gain self-mastery over a set of data and then you know it, and once you know it, you can go out and execute it. It changes all of the time. And so the second big challenge we had was knowing that there's 100,000 documents, and we've got to try and get the right document, which would really be the equivalent of the right recommendation for the farmer, in the hands of the agronomist as quickly as possible. And when we started to look at the current context, people were downloading things locally. You had agronomists literally running from a field back in the car, opening the laptop, trying to find things, and then jumping back out the car to the farmer, which is not the slickest experience. And so we looked at using some other add-in 365 AI capabilities to help solve for this.
Yeah, and underneath all of this is cognitive search. So you might have seen some sessions already today talking about this idea of semantic search, the edges, the relationships between me, the content, and the people I work with. So M365 is already using that, and you can take advantage of that experience through Graph and through some of the API layers to make the searching experience more personal, based on who you are, what you're doing. So if you're an agronomist that specialises in salads in Scotland, because you're on that sort of profile of agronomy team, that helps search to interpret some of those pieces of information across that body of 100,000 plus documents, and it's going to bring those experiences back. And then we're combining that with Viva dashboards delivered experience. To Suzy's point, these people don't work in an office, and they even don't work on a laptop most of the time. So delivering something onto the Teams mobile app through Viva Connections called Job Guides. And this allows us to step a less experienced agronomy team member into very detailed scientific information in a guided way in the lens that they're trying to think about it. So if we're stepping in and we're thinking about, okay, we've been asked a question about micronutrients. So I'm going to come into the job guides via micronutrients, and I'm going to go down through my growing stage that the farmer's crop is at to my piece of IP. So this is where we're really trying to get the agronomy team member to the right document out of that massive document library.
Yeah. So this is really how we're drilling down through that 100,000 set of documents. We're giving pathways through that knowledge. We're not expecting the individual to know where to go to get the content that they need.
Yeah. And of course, we mentioned different ways of looking at the content. So same example, using job guides again, but this time I'm coming in as a season. So I'm now talking to the farmer about the upcoming season. So I'm going to come into job guides again, and I'm going to go through the seasonal variant, and I'm going to pick autumn in this case. We're going to propose that it's a wet autumn, which stage the crop is expected to be, because again, crops grow at different times of the year, and I'm going to get down to that complex scientific information for the fertilizer purchase. So we're helping scale not only the experience of the very senior agronomy team members into the less, 3-4 years into their career teammates, but we're also allowing them to look across 100,000 plus documents and find the right needle in the haystack, so to speak, from that particularly detailed scientific content. So this is a real enabler for that front of line team.
The second AI tool we use to support Agrii is the collections product that we saw earlier in the session when we were talking about St James Place. They are so unique in how they approach their work that providing collections allowed for them to work with their support assistants to aggregate and collate content in a way that made sense for them when they were out in the field talking to different farmers. And so you can see here that they're able to get into that content again in a way that's meaningful for them, rather than us trying to funnel them through an architecture that wasn't going to make sense for the way they personally like to work. as with most people, if it's not intuitive or right for them, they just don't use it. And that wasn't a situation that was going to work for the organisation.
Yeah. So those are 4 case studies. Those are 4 real-world applications of artificial intelligence capabilities that come from the Microsoft ecosystem. But there are more. SharePoint Premium and the formerly Microsoft Syntex of document processing. So being able to classify a document as it comes in and being able to say, okay, well, this is in Agrii's case, this is a label for fertilizer. Being able to extract through that process of Syntex the information, so, weight of the package, the purchase price, the expiry dates, and being able to add that to the SharePoint metadata. No human being likes putting tags on things. No human being likes looking through all of those words to write one value in a column in a SharePoint library. So SharePoint Premium on dropping the content in is a really powerful option. Then you've got the content creation part of that experience, which is if we're using data points, we can generate content out the back of that. So we've seen organisations democratising the creation of NDAs. So there's a forms form. Somebody says, I want it for this customer, this duration, this is the thing I'm trying to protect. And the NDA gets created through Microsoft SharePoint Premium, dropped into their document library in Teams using Power Automate. And that's automating a very common business process that used to go across an email to a team that then did something, that then sent a file. And this long-winded, wasteful process can be automated through AI.
I think in general it's probably worth sharing that when we work with organisations and we're helping to advise them on what kind of AI to use and for who and why, we always look at what the business objectives are for that organisation. If growth is a big thing for them, maybe their numbers have been a little bit sluggish, then we might be focusing on the sales team and enabling, supporting them to do their jobs better. If they're an organisation that has fantastic product, but the iteration cycles are taking too long and it's a frustration to the leadership team, we might be looking at how to speed up R&D processes and to get that underway. So we came to do what we've done with our clients because we've talked to the leadership about what their sort of 3-year plan is and where they think there's sluggishness within the organisation or something that needs improving. And I think over the course of the event, an event like ESPC, it can be a bit overwhelming. You're hearing about all the different types of AI, and you think, we're not doing any of those. We need to start doing things, or we're going to fall behind. But we would always say, actually, start from the other end and think about your business specifically, and what you're trying to do, and then work back to the appropriate AI tool to support that work. For those of you that are interested, on the Adin 365 website, you can get access to a webinar we did a little while ago that actually starts from business objectives and helps you work out which bit of AI might work for you, and that's downloadable. But otherwise, thank you for joining the session. We're at booth 4 if you want to talk more, and I hope you found it useful.